Good day, Just Jane 1813 readers. Today I'm here with a treat for you. We have Karen Cox visiting. Karen has been a visitor here before, and we have also done video chats together. And today we're here to talk to you about Austen, but not just Austen. We're going to be talking about Austen and Austen-esque adaptations because Karen has one coming out herself. It's titled Son of a Preacher Man. And this is a story that I had the pleasure of reading a few years ago, and I actually reviewed it here also for my readers. And today, Karen and I are going to be talking about Austen adaptations because they are so loved. And after 200 years, we just can't seem to get enough of Jane. But why is that? And what is it that makes readers keep coming back to Jane and her messages? So Karen, welcome. Could you give everyone a big hello and tell us a little bit about what you've been doing lately?
Hello, everyone. It's good to see you all again. So as far as what I've been doing lately is I've been trying to get this book baby ready to go. It actually releases on July 1st, which I don't know when we're going to end up on the blog, but today is June 30th, so it's going to be tomorrow. So I'm a little, nervous and excited. But it's a re-release of a book that I put out 5 years ago. And I'm really excited about it. It's in a lot of ways, it's one of my favorite things that I've written, mostly because I'm just in love with those characters. So anyway, that's what I've been doing, trying to get this one ready. And then I've been working a little bit on a short story and trying to plan also where I might want to go next with writing, what kind of project I want to tackle next. I've been doing putting a lot of thought to that this summer.
Well, I can't wait to see what you come up with, but I'm here today to talk to you about this story because, as you said, it's releasing tomorrow, which I know has a lot of people excited, and you went out and you put a beautiful new cover on the story, which I think really sets the stage for a great new beginning again for this story. So, thinking about beginnings and first impressions and all the things we love about Jane Austen, why do you think 200 years later we are still creating Austen-esque stories and thinking about Jane Austen as much as we still do today?
Well, I mean, we talked about this a little bit before when we did the video chat before, and I think that I said then that I think that one of the big reasons is because Austen is the genius that she was, and that she did something new and something different that no one else had really ever done before, and especially no female author had ever really done very well before or very much before. Not that there weren't other female authors who were doing interesting things, but she just sort of took this little corner of England where she was and sort of adapted, she observed and looked at human nature in a way that is timeless. So, I think that one of the reasons we're so fascinated still with Austen is because of the characters that she wrote, that we can identify either with them or we know of someone that we can identify with that character. And she always has them grow. She has them flawed, so they're interesting. She has them complex, and then they grow. And at the end of the story, once they address their flaw, or the heroes and the heroines they get a happily ever after because they have their integrity and because they've changed the things that they needed to change to be more complete people. And I think that's a pretty timeless sort of story. It's a story that is still relevant to people today. Because that's that's the human journey. So she basically talked about the human journey, and she did it in a very smart and witty and even satirical, snarky sort of way sometimes. But she never delved into bitterness and sarcasm and things like that. She kept the hopefulness of the human condition in her stories. So that's my opinion. That's why I think that we still are so fascinated with her. and her stories now.
I also think that her stories represented or offered a naturalness to them that wasn't really seen before in fiction. And I think that that's really important in Austen-esque works today. I think that readers have to feel that the characters are real. I think that there can't be this flat or this overly done or this overly saccharine feeling about the characters' actions and dialogues, because Austen was so true to that human nature and made her people act in such natural ways that I think that's really an important part too of what we enjoy in the best of the adaptations. So I know that I've loved that in your work as well. And I know that there are people who are really strong in doing and delivering that too. But as we deliver and as we enjoy Austen-esque adaptations in the future, what do you think people will continue to want to see? Do you think that Austen will continue to be adapted in print? Do you think we'll see more film? Do you think we'll hear more podcasts? How do you imagine us adapting Austen continuing from here on in?
Well, I think that there will continue to be books, because I think that Austen fans are people who like to read, who like to read books in particular, maybe ebooks, because most everybody reads on an e-reader now, but not everybody. Some people will still tell me, I'm waiting for the print version because I only read print. There's a lot of people who like that for various reasons. Some of them it's just visual. Some of it's because they like to be able to flip around in the book. So I think that there's always going to be a subset of people who are going to enjoy Austen adaptations, variations, alternate era, whatever, in a literary form. But I think that I don't know how much more they're going to do. I say this and then they will do more. Like big budget film, sort of like we saw in the 90s, with Gwyneth Paltrow's Emma and Sense and Sensibility with I keep calling them Eleanor and Marianne, but that's not their name. That's not the actresses' names. But you know which one I'm talking about. Ang Lee's, the one that he directed.
Mm-hmm. One of my favorite, probably my second favorite adaptation.
Yeah, I love that adaptation. So, but that's sort of a big budget Hollywood, and it doesn't seem like big budget Hollywood is doing that kind of stuff that much anymore. So, we still have the BBC adaptations, and I think that a lot of the, or many of the complaints about the big Hollywood movies were the things that they changed, things that, or they didn't, they sort of skimmed over things in Austen that readers and Austen fans would have liked to see more of. So I think that a mini-series type of thing or a TV series type of thing where you could make it longer might actually be a better way to adapt Austen, because you can hopefully get some of the complexity in there in some of her stories and some of the dialogue and things like that. But then there's always podcasts. I was reading an article recently about how there has been an upsurge of theatrical theater adaptations of Austen's work recently. So, that's another option. It's a way for people to be involved, and it has sort of a feeling of immediacy and being there, and there's an energy to live theater that I think probably would appeal to Austen readers, but it appeals to everybody. So maybe we can rake in some more Austen fans that way. And then you also have the things like the Lizzie Bennet diaries, the internet TV kinds of things, the serial kinds of things, sort of like the old-fashioned radio serials, back in the 30s. And I think there's one for Emma Approved.
Yes, there is.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
I haven't seen that one. I've only seen the Lizzie Bennet diaries, but I've seen parts of Emma Approved, but I haven't seen the whole thing.
It's adorable.
So, yeah. So, and and podcasts, I don't know so much. I think that would be a good way to do discussions of Austen, but I don't know about adaptations so much because you don't have that visual piece. And if you're going to do that, then why do you not do a book? I don't know. I could be wrong about that, but
It actually reminds me a little of back in the day. I think part of it is just also dependent upon what readers are comfortable with and what technology is able to offer. Because when you think about how I think Dickens, I believe Eliot, a lot of people wrote in like magazines or like serials, like over time they would release their stories slowly. So maybe like podcasts could offer something similar to, listeners, because audiobooks I think are definitely experiencing more of a surge than in previous years. And I was just also reading an article about how book companies are putting a lot more into their audiobooks as far as the narrators they're choosing, the kind of voiceovers and the kind of technology they're using to incorporate to enhance the storytelling through the audiobook process. So it would be interesting to see if people are going to even build some Austen adaptations through that mode even more. I don't know if you were able to see Unleashing Mr. Darcy, and there was a sequel to that recently, Marrying Mr. Darcy. So do you think that we'll see Hallmark or similar type channels adapting Austen more and more over time?
Well, I don't know that they'll necessarily adapt Austen herself, but
Mm-hmm.
I think that it just depends, of course, on what the people who make those decisions, I think, what they see,
Mm-hmm.
and what they, who they're familiar with for various reasons, who they're connected with. But people have been saying to me for years they would like to see a film adaptation of 1932. And someone said to me when Undeceived came out that, that was something else that someone said, that this would make a good movie. Um, and I think that if they think that people will watch them, if they think that there's an appeal for Austen fans, and a lot of that depends upon the success of the Unleashing Mr. Darcy and the sequel, Marrying Mr. Darcy, that I think that may be very very possible that we'll have some of our Jaff favorites adapted at some point into film or TV.
I think that because they made a sequel to Unleashing Mr. Darcy, I think that speaks pretty highly of probably the success that the first one had. So I'm really hopeful that some of my favorites, like yours, will be adapted in a similar way. That would be great fun. As an author yourself, do you ever dream about what if Son of a Preacher Man was made into a movie? Such as, have you done casting in your head? Have you ever thought, oh, I wish he could play and she could play? Do authors do that?
Yeah, I think that we do that some. I was joking the other day that all the people that I sort of dream cast for Son of a Preacher Man, well, they're just not with us on the earth anymore.
Such as?
Such as, like, Gary Cooper could be the Reverend.
No.
And if he could just smile better, Ricky Nelson could be Billy Ray. But he didn't have the smile. He has to have the smile. And Marilyn Monroe, a young Marilyn Monroe, she could be Lizzie. In fact, Billy Ray actually compares her to a young brunette Marilyn Monroe. So, yeah, and then I was thinking about Patricia Neal. Patricia Neal. Do you remember who Patricia Neal was?
No.
I'm trying to think. She was... the thing that I knew her from was she was in the movie for the Waltons, not the TV show. They got a different actress for that, but the actual movie, the first movie that they did, I think she was.
Oh.
But for Mrs. Gardner, I mean, she sort of has this wise, kind persona, about her, at least in that role. So I was thinking, well, she would have been a good Mrs. Gardner. Yeah, I think that's probably some writers are more likely to do that than others. And a lot of that probably depends on your process for writing. When I write, I'm very visual when I write. So it's almost like I see a movie in my head. So I can imagine the opening credits for Find Wonder in All Things with this little boy running down a boat dock and Appalachian Spring by Aaron Copland playing in the background, and So, because that's the way I saw it when I originally wrote it.
Hmm.
So.
Do you think that people who are viewers and perhaps maybe enjoy their stories through that more visual format are more receptive to having Austen adapted, or do you think that people who prefer print or who really prefer canon have a similar open mind or a similar flexibility when it comes to seeing Austen adapted?
I think probably there's because it is a different medium, and the words aren't there on the page, that someone who, and I'm just extrapolating here because I like all the Austen adaptations and variations, so it doesn't I'm willing to go almost anywhere with those, but perhaps that they might be more willing to see something that was an adaptation or a variation as opposed to reading something. I guess that's a possibility, that just because it's a different medium and they're not sitting there reading, and as they're reading, they're thinking this is like Austen or this is not like Austen, or whereas it's a different kind of experience when you're watching something on the screen. I don't know.
Do you find that, Austin lived 200 years ago? We have a very modern and different sensibility. I think it's hard for even people who have a good understanding of Austen's world 200 years ago to have the same understanding of what life was really like back then. Do you think it's okay when artists change a lot in an Austen adaptation? Or do you think that it's really important when Austen is being adapted, there are certain things that stay true to Austen regardless of the era or regardless of the sensibilities being tried, to be communicated in that story?
Well, I think that as I think artistic license is okay. Obviously, I think that because I do that. But I think that if you with Austen adaptations, if you take sort of this skeleton outline of a character, and you keep those traits there, you keep Mr. Darcy haughty and in a sort of a class where he might be separated from Elizabeth, unless you're doing a gender swap, of course, and then all bets are off there. But I think if you keep the character traits, the good traits and the bad traits, so if you keep those things together, I think you can get away with some artistic license. I think that if you go too far away from the character traits, like I said, the flaws and the integrity and the growth and things like that, that's when you run into the kind of situation where you're not really doing an Austen adaptation anymore. You're doing something else.
Different.
So that's kind of, and the general theme of the story, in the Emma story, that you're not as smart as you think you are. And in Persuasion, you can, second chances are possible. And if you keep that sort of general storyline or story plot or story theme, and then you keep the characters with their flaws and their good traits, I think you can have a lot of freedom as far as era and maybe even plot points and things.
Do you think because Austen's messages are so applicable just to human nature that we're comfortable with her being modernized? Or do you think that we're just so obsessed with Austen, we just don't, care how we get it, we just want our Austen?
I think that there are people who like Austen because they like the Regency period, because they like just that time of history. And so because Austen is part of that time of history, that's what fascinates them about her. And I think that there are some people who like Austen because of what she was as a writer, and the stories that she made and the characters that she made. And then I think there's some people who like both, sort of, that Venn diagram. So there are people who sort of intersect and do both of those things. So, I think that I don't know. I think that there are some people for whom they'll try anything that's Austen just because they want to see what you've got. They want to see what you're going to try, and see if it fits, what they think or what they don't.
I hope that people are also, instead of only just being interested because something has the Austen title or the Austen characters, I hope that the quality of the writing is also something that writers, or really readers, I meant, really try to, find high quality when they're reading, because I think that the quality of the writing has to be strong to make the experience really everything that it could and should be, as opposed to what I believe so many people today just sticking, characters' names into a story, or putting a title on a book and calling it related to Jane Austen when really it's not. And I worry about that only because I feel like it turns people off to Austen-esque fiction when it's such a great genre to read. I hope that the quality is what shines through. You described Son of a Preacher Man as an original story inspired by Pride and Prejudice. How did you come about describing your story that way?
Well, when I first conceived of the idea of the story, it came from a discussion that I was having with some other Jane Austen fans about how bad could you make Lizzie Bennet and still make her Lizzie Bennet? How bad could you do it? How dark could you be? How and still be Elizabeth, the Elizabeth that we all know and love, right? So I made this joke that, well, you couldn't have any more disparate social class or whatever than a minister's son and the girl from the wrong side of the tracks, or the girl with the reputation. And somebody, joked about the song, like Son of a Preacher Man. And I was like, yeah, exactly. That would be that those people would have a lot to overcome, which is what Pride and Prejudice in a lot of ways is about. They have a lot to overcome in order to be able to be together. Not from themselves, in addition to what's going on with everybody else. In Pride and Prejudice, Elizabeth she's a gentleman's daughter, but she's certainly not of Darcy's class. So you have all these social or societal kinds of pressures on them, but you also have the intrapersonal and interpersonal issues with them, with the Pride and the Prejudice, and each of them have pride and each of them have prejudice toward the other. So I think that this story, Son of a Preacher Man, when you have a minister's son who's been taught a certain way, who has certain societal pressures, and then you have this other girl who has societal pressures put on her, and she's also very poor. That's a lot for them to overcome, both from external forces and also from internal forces. So a lot of what drove my interpretation of Lizzie in here, in Son of a Preacher Man, was this sort of prejudice that she had against Billy Ray because of who he was. And that he has some too, but not as much. He overcomes his much faster, I think, than she does, because she's been hurt worse.
And I also love that your story took place over several years, I believe.
Yeah, about two to 3 years.
So we get to really see and understand what makes those characters change and what they have to go through in a modern setting to come to a place where they really know who they are as people and what they want. Because when they first meet, they're very young and they're very influenced by other people, particularly your male character. He feels a lot of pressure to be, something that his family wants him to be, which is very, Darcy-ish. And I think that the way that you develop his character is just really so believable and so compelling, but in a way that doesn't feel artificial. It really feels like somebody who is coming of age and really trying to understand what's important in his life, even though, his father has this, image of being something, very, very, holy and upstanding, and has these set of expectations for his son as well, even though he has these feelings, for someone that he's not so sure that he should have these feelings for. So I love the way that you developed that story over time. What do you believe would really speak to other readers about why Son of a Preacher Man would be for them? What would you say if you were able to go and talk to readers and try to explain why you think this is a story that would resonate with people who love Austen?
Well, I think that this is a kind of story that might appeal to different sets of readers. I think that there are readers who may remember the time period or have heard, like I did, heard stories from their parents about the time period that it is. So there's a little bit of nostalgia there. I think that because it is set in 1959 through about 1961, and that's quite far removed from us, I think people who are interested a little bit in history and in what we might, it wasn't a simpler time, but that we might think of as a simpler time, that they might enjoy that as well, looking a little bit at the sort of the mores, and particularly this was right before the sexual revolution. So, and right before the 1960 was when the birth control pill was put out. So things changed a lot in like the decade after that. So this is sort of right before that happened. So at that time, there's a lot of more of a difference between what society was telling women they should be and men what they should be. But then I think that there's this set of readers for whom this would be an appealing story because it is a coming of age story. And I'm thinking about people who are probably going through that kind of time period in their life right now where, this is what everybody else wants from me, or what I thought I always wanted for myself. But as experiences change me, and as I meet people who change me, I'm going to have to adjust some of my attitudes and some of the things that I think about, and what do I really want my life to be? What's going to be the thing that's important to me? Because Billy Ray and Lizzie are asking themselves those questions all during the book. So I think that there's kind of a different subsets of readers who would enjoy that. As far as Austen fans, I think that people who are fans of Pride and Prejudice, they're going to see some parallels. They're going to see some parallels in Billy Ray, and also in Lizzie, even though she's not exactly like Lizzie Bennet, and even though the plot of events isn't exactly, but some things, like there's a letter, just like there's a letter in Pride and Prejudice. But when you add in the parents and the society and, the other people, there's a Caroline Bingley, so the people are going to recognize her. So I think that there's enough that makes it sort of fun to kind of pick all that apart. But then it's different enough that you're kind of wondering what's going to happen here. What's going to happen with these people? Are they going to do what Darcy and Lizzie did? Are they going to be able to come together at some point or another? And how are they going to do that?
Mm-hmm. And I think that you brought up a great point, because I think for me, really interesting Austen-esque fiction keeps you guessing. It doesn't just feel like this is the part of Pride and Prejudice where this is going to happen. This is where this is going to happen. This story does definitely have a sense and a feel of its own also. And I think that that's another reason why it would be a great summer beach read. This definitely is a fun read. It's, it has some, serious themes, but it also has a bit of a light heart, and it definitely flows in a way where you can enjoy it and talk about it with your girlfriends or talk about it with your mom or your sisters. I think that it's a great, great read in those respects as well. So I really thank you so much for sharing all this with my readers today. I know that you will keep us in the Austen-esque fiction that we love, and I love talking to you about adaptations because as someone who loves Austen more than anything else in the world, I hope that people like you continue to adapt her and keep her going forever. So thank you so much for being here today, Karen.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure talking with you. It always is. I feel very grateful for the opportunity to talk about something that I love so much.
Thank you. And have a great summer. I know you have some big plans, and I know they include writing. So we look forward to hearing more from you.
All righty. Thanks a lot. Bye, everybody.